Scenes of police arresting activists suspected of provoking violent protests against the G8 and scuffles between officers and demonstrators have already set an uneasy backdrop for the UK's presidency for the G8 summit of world leaders as it gets underway in Northern Ireland. Anger over current austerity measures, bank bailouts and fat cap bonuses prompted scores of people to take to the streets in central London for a carnival against capitalism. Meanwhile, crowds of trade union supporters in Belfast gathered and refused to be ignored, whilst the police and security forces prompted a ring of steel around the summit of the world's 8 leading industrialised nations. At the weekend, Prime Minister David Cameron set out his stall on his headline issue, getting tough on corporate tax.
At the G8, I'm going to push for international agreements to fight the scourge of tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. That means automatic exchange of information between our tax authorities, so those who want to evade taxes have nowhere to hide. It means getting companies to report tax to tax authorities where they earn their profits and where they pay their tax. It also means transparency about who owns which companies and who benefits from it, so-called beneficial ownership.
IBTimes UK has been following the issue ever since top executives from big-name firms like Google, Starbucks and Amazon were called to account for their actions in front of the Public Accounts Committee back in November. The firms have all denied trying to minimise their tax bill in the UK. But firms avoiding paying tax isn't just a British problem, it's a global one, and many feel the developing world is bearing the brunt. Action Aid is a charity concerned about the wider impact of firms around the world trying to get out of paying tax.
Sure, well today the Enough Food for Everyone If campaign has set up the Isle of Shady, which is the new tax haven just behind me, and the reason we've done that is to highlight the ridiculousness of tax havens and the tax dodging that they facilitate. We know that tax havens mean that people in the UK are suffering because the UK is losing so much money to them, but even worse, poor countries across the world are losing huge amounts of money to tax havens. To give an example, if poor countries could keep just a quarter of the money they lose to tax havens, they could eliminate hunger by 2025.
But some of these firms that you mentioned who seem to be, or appear to be avoiding tax, they're creating jobs, so what's the problem?
Well, we don't think it's an either-or situation. We think it's fantastic for businesses to invest in the developing world. Jobs are absolutely needed and they should be encouraged to go in there and do that. But at the same time, there's no excuse for not paying a fair share of taxes where companies do business. And it's particularly not fair on the local businesses who are often trying to compete. So in Zambia, for example, I've met with market stall holders who pay a tax stamp every single day that they're in the market. Now, these people who are eking out a living are sometimes paying more in corporation tax effectively than massive and very profitable multinational companies that are operating just next door.
The West African country of Guinea is one of the poorest in the world and has been labelled as one of the continent's geological scandals. It's rich in minerals like iron ore and gold and is one of the world's biggest exporters of bauxite, yet half of its 10 million people live in poverty. Guinea's President Alpha Conde is overhauling the country's lucrative mining industry, as well as investigating corrupt deals because he suspects some mining firms are making huge profits but using tax loopholes to the fullest. In an interview in London, Mr. Conde says he needs and welcomes the support of the USA, the UK, France and Germany to trace international financial transactions of mining companies and to fight corruption. But on Saturday, Prime Minister David Cameron told the Open for Growth meeting that the onus shouldn't just be on the West and that all countries must get aggressive about tax.
But frankly, this needs political leadership from the developed world too. We have the tools in our hands to tackle these problems. We can build international tax systems that make it easier for developing countries to collect the taxes they are due. We can ensure that our extractive industries and companies are accountable and transparent in their dealings, and we can do more to help promote African trade.
Representatives of at least 9 of Britain's overseas territories and Crown dependencies met with the PM at Number 10 at the weekend, and they agreed to move forward on more transparency and a better exchange of information. And it's not only tax avoidance that's worrying people. On Friday, just minutes from IBTimes UK's London HQ in Canary Wharf, crowds of anti-capitalists and climate change campaigners came together for a rally.
I, as an individual, do not have the answer for what is your alternative. I want to be involved in a discussion, in a debate, and that's what we're here to do today. It's not to create a manifesto, but it's to share ideas, it's to inspire people. So it's to inspire the people who are here today to share our knowledge, but also to inspire people who are sitting at home, who are reading about this, who are shouting at their television every time they see David Cameron come on and tell you that the cuts are necessary, when we know that the cuts are not necessary. This is a political choice by this government, and we want to inspire people to say that there is an alternative to these cuts, to the way that the world is run at the moment by David Cameron, by the G8, by big business.
A so-called alternative G8 conference will also be taking place, with a closer eye on one subject which very much seems to be on the back burner at the official G8 conference.
All of the things that they're discussing are very important, whether it be taxation, whether it be transparency, whether it be open economies, open democracy. They're all vital issues. There's one issue which we think has not really been sufficiently addressed, which is around the environment and what all these things do in overlapping do for that. It is in there, but it's a small part, and it's probably downplayed too much. There are so many of these issues which are very interconnected, and environment is probably a theme which runs through all these, and if you don't look at these issues in relation to how it will affect how you go about transforming your economy to deal with sort of climate change that is happening, then I don't know whether it will be effective enough measures. So that's the major criticism of it, really. The great range that they're bringing up are all issues which need to be addressed. How they're framing their agenda to address them is very much open to criticism, and so that's some of the things that we will be really exploring within our alternatives.
Various groups are vowing to continue their protests throughout the summit against what they've dubbed corrupt capitalism. So Cameron has a tough task on his hands. He must convince international leaders to join him in telling the wider public that they've listened to their concerns and that they have the will to make tangible changes towards making the world a better and fairer and less corrupt place.